We now welcome a video message. Nous accueillons maintenant un message vidéo du directeur général de l'Organisation mondiale de la santé, from Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus.
Excellencies, colleagues, friends, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to speak to you today, and I'm really sorry that I can't be with you in Vancouver. Health for all means exactly what it says. Everyone, everywhere, should have access to the health services they need without facing financial hardship. And that includes every woman and every girl. When women are healthy, they can truly be the power for change in their workplaces, their families, their communities, and their nations. But until all women and girls have access to quality and affordable health care, until all women and girls can freely access services for sexual and reproductive health, until all women and girls are treated and respected as equals, we have not achieved health for all. Too often, women lack autonomy and decision-making power over their own health. Every day, 830 women die from preventable complications of pregnancy or childbirth. Gender-based violence affects the health of 1 in 3 women. And in sub-Saharan Africa, new HIV infections are over 40% higher in women than men, while women have less knowledge about the disease. To address all these challenges and more, WHO is working to generate good data disaggregated by sex to understand who is being left behind. We work with countries to empower, educate, and engage women to take charge of their own health, to give them equal control over resources and access to high-quality health care and family planning services. We're also working to improve gender equality in the health sector. Women make up 70% of the global health workforce, but hold only 25% of senior roles. WHO is committed to working with all of you and with all countries and all partners to truly achieve health for all. Together, we can empower women to be the power of change. I thank you.
Welcome to the stage our next moderator and panel. Nous accueillons sur la scène le modérateur et le panel suivant.
Bonjour à tous. Merci d'être déjà là dans cette salle et d'être présents avec ces merveilleux participants qui vont partager avec nous leurs remarques, leur expérience sur le combat de l'égalité homme-femme. Alors je vais commencer par les présenter. À ma gauche, la célèbre et appréciée ministre du Développement international, ministre des Femmes et de l'égalité des genres du Canada, Madame Mariam Monsef. À sa gauche, nous avons Raven Lacerte, Moose Hide Campaign, Ambassador and co-founder. Then we have Saidia Zahidi, Managing Director and Head of the Center for the New Economy and Society at the World Economic Forum. We needed a man, so here is Arthur Erken, Director, Communications and Strategic Partnerships from UNFPA. Madame Emilie De Leon, Executive Director of Prospera. And at the extreme left, we have Lopa Banerjee, Director of Civil Society Division of UN Women. So my first question, ma première question, s'adresse à vous, Madame. Nous savons que le Canada a pris l'initiative de mettre l'égalité hommes-femmes comme priorité lorsque vous présidiez le G7. Cette idée, cette initiative a été reprise par le président Macron, le président français, qui a décidé d'annoncer cette participation et cette priorité lors d'un discours à l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies à New York en 2018. Quel est le pas suivant? Nous savons que bientôt le G7 va se tenir à Biarritz en France, mais est-ce que vous, le Canada, allez continuer à travers vos initiatives et par les actions de votre ministère de transmettre cette volonté de mettre l'égalité homme-femme comme priorité mondiale?
Many thanks to the women of the world and our allies who've shown up at Women Deliver in Vancouver on this traditional Coast Salish territory to mobilize and strategize and take heart, knowing that this movement that we all belong to, this movement that started long before any of us got here, it'll continue long after we're gone. This movement, though, is no longer on the margins. This movement has brought us to a moment in time where the head of the UN, the head of the World Health Organization, the Prime Minister of Canada are proudly declaring themselves as feminists, part of this movement. So the big takeaway so far is that we are no longer on the margins. We have a seat around decision-making tables. The minister representing Guinea here at Women Deliver herself was someone who worked for the UN and is now sitting around a really important decision-making table. I'm a YWCA baby. I get a seat around the first gender-balanced cabinet in Canada's history. We are mainstreaming an intersectional gendered lens into everything the government of Canada does, including our budgets. But yes, we were also able to mainstream that lens and the work that is required into everything we did during our presidency of the G7 last year. President Macron agreed to continue that and bring around him an advisory body made up of some of the world's most renowned feminists to continue that work. All this to say, there's a reason why we are moving from the margins slowly but efficiently into the mainstream, and that is because gender equality is the right thing to do, but the movement has convinced leaders and economists that it's also the economically smart thing to do. This is about $150 billion added to Canada's economy in the next year when we increase the participation of women in the workforce, and globally, it's about a $12 trillion economy. So, mobilized by the conviction from the history of this movement and the numbers that are showing clear results, we will continue to push and also be pushed by leaders like those here at Women Deliver to continue on this path.
Thank you. So Canada is going to continue to push. I turn to Lopa. I mean, you director at UN Women. UN Women is a United Nations agency that has been created in 2010, if I remember well. And the task of UN Women is to fight for the defense of gender equality, empowerment of women. So what about Beijing plus 24 this year, 25 next year? Will there be a reason to celebrate?
Absolutely. So UN Women was born of the activism that exists in this room. UN Women was born of civil society activism, women's rights activism, working together with governments and government activism to ensure that there is a space and a voice for gender equality at the highest levels of policy making and to take that forward. The Fourth World Conference on Women that took place in 1995 in Beijing was also born of mobilizing by the women's rights movement together, working with governments. 25 years, almost 25 years after Beijing, next year we will come to a moment of celebration of that blueprint for gender equality that was set in 1995 by governments and civil society working together for a common vision of equality that benefits and celebrates everybody in the world. But next year is also a moment for multiple other celebrations. It is the 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325. That was also born of activism. It is the 5th year review of the Sustainable Development Goals. That was also born of activism. And it is the 10th anniversary of the establishment of UN Women. That was also born of activism. And this year, we are celebrating the 25th anniversary of the International Convention on Population and Development, also born of activism. So next year, we are really coming together for Beijing to celebrate this moment of multilateral activism, of feminist mobilizing, to ensure that where we are lagging on the commitments and promises of gender equality, we have a moment to center stage that activism, to take the necessary actions, the accelerated actions for implementation, to plug those gaps that exist, to ensure that the world is well on the path for irreversible and gender equality that is not rolled back.
Alors justement, pour arriver à mettre en pratique toutes ces actions, à les encourager, à faire en sorte qu'elles soient plus dynamiques, on a besoin du secteur privé. Donc c'est pour ça que je me tourne maintenant vers Sadia Zaidi. Vous travaillez au World Economic Forum, qui est basé à Genève. Là, il y a beaucoup d'initiatives qui sont prises. Vous avez une meilleure perspective du secteur privé, puisque nous savons que vous avez des relations permanentes depuis de nombreuses années avec ces différents acteurs. Comment est-ce que vous voyez les choses?
I think there are a couple of things. On the one hand, because this plenary is amongst the closing ones, I don't want to bring too much of the negative analysis, but I do want to talk a little bit about what are some of the problems that will be coming up when we look towards the future of work, and then a little bit about what we can do about it. If we look today at the jobs that are likely to be disrupted as we head into the future of work, we know that some of them are jobs that are blue-collar work, often in factories and often primarily dominated by men. But we also know that there's a lot of work in the service sector, primarily dominated by women, that is also going to be disrupted. We have to start thinking about that. We have to start thinking with a gender lens when it comes to reskilling, upskilling, and job transitions for both women and men in this future economy. As we start doing that, I think we have to think about the talent pipeline. So while women now make up the majority of those that are going into universities, if you look at the AI talent, so just the talent, those people that have the skills for artificial intelligence, only 23% of that talent across most economies is currently made up of women. We have to change that. These are the people that are designing the future. They're designing the future economies and societies we're going to be living in. So we have to ensure that there's a big influx of female talent into some of these future professions. And we have to look at that from the supply side, but we also have to look at that from the demand side. The private sector has to think about integrating more women, more gender equality, into positions of leadership, but also into some of the most strategic occupations that are now growing within different companies. And that's something that we're working on at the World Economic Forum, trying to get companies to embed and hardwire gender equality into the future of work. We think this is critical, and there's actually a great opportunity to do so. Actually use some of those technologies to embed gender equality, use some of the diversity and inclusion tech that's now available. And the early start on that has not been great. The results on the first round of the D&I tech has not been great, but we know we can change that. We can see the results very quickly and actually embed gender equality into the future.
So Arthur Erken, So you work for UNPA, United Nations Population Fund. So what can you tell us about that big meeting, conference that is going to take place in 5 months in Nairobi, Kenya, this international conference about population and development? So could you explain what it is about, first of all, because most of us don't know exactly what this conference is about? That plus 25, does it mean that it's the 25th anniversary of this conference? What do you expect from that? What do you think is important to highlight? And also the fact that the organization is defending for many years the rights of women, gender equality. And unfortunately, we see a rise of aggressivity, attacks against these rights. And I have to admit that we are quite disappointed by the position of these international organizations regarding what's happening.
Well, thank you so much. Yes, mid-November this year, we all convene in Nairobi to do two things. One is to, of course, commemorate the successes we've had in the last 25 years with regards to the implementation of the ICPD Program of Action. And let me say a little bit about that, why it was so important. In 1994, in Cairo, the international community at the International Conference on Population Development adopted a program of action which did two things. One, it put women at the center of development. That was the first really where a conference of that nature put women at the center of development. And it committed itself to universal access to sexual and reproductive health and rights by 2014. That was the agreement. We're in 2019. We're 5 years behind that original commitment that we made. So we feel it's high time, particularly because probably of the pushback, but not just of the pushback. It is just the right thing to do once in a while to start looking at how are we doing with this agenda. And there's lots to celebrate. There's lots to celebrate over the last 25 years. Many, many countries have taken on the baton and saying we want to do something, we need to do something about sexual and reproductive health and rights for women and girls in particular. But there is a large unfinished business. There are 800 women still dying in childbirth every single day. There are 8,000 women every single day, girls particularly, subjected to female genital mutilation. 33,000 girls marry every single day, etc., etc. There is a large unfinished agenda. And it is time that we recommit to that agenda, saying we can do better as an international community. We agreed to that in '94. We actually agreed to that in 2015 because a large part of that agenda of ICPD is co-opted now in Agenda 2030. It's time that we get serious to that. Enough talk, it's time for action. And the action is now, because this is the moment where we need to do this. The pushback is real. Obviously, the pushback is very real. But this community won't let itself be pushed back. That's very clear. And the pushback is also real because we have made successes. Because there is a general fear that we're actually succeeding. And that is, of course, what we also want to celebrate. This community is strong. It will continue to do so. Now, what we as UNFPA, who is initiating this Nairobi summit on ICPD 25, want to see is at a minimum, want to see that the world's community recommits to 3 zeros. Zero unmet need for contraceptive and family planning. 200 million women that we know of every single day do not have access to family planning and would love to be in control of their own bodies and are not having that. This is 2019. Come on. We can do better and we need to commit everyone to do that. That's the first zero. The second zero is indeed getting to zero on maternal mortality. We're tired of hearing, oh, it's 800 now, let's go to 400 and let's go to 200. No, it has to be zero. What's wrong with that? That has to be, and we need to commit ourselves to that, at least as a minimum. And the third one, gender-based violence and harmful practices against women and girls. By the way, that is in Agenda 2030 very squarely, and it's time that we recommit ourselves to that. That's a minimum we would like to see, and we do believe. Imagine that world. Really imagine that world in 2030, when no woman dies in childbirth, where women are in control of their own bodies and destinies, when no woman is subjected to gender-based violence, that will be truly transformative. And we can do that together. And this is the time where we have to show our colors. Are we serious about this agenda or not? And we have one shot in this decade, and that is the shot that we have in November in Cairo, and in Nairobi. And I want everyone to bring the energy that we've seen here today and the last few days to Nairobi, because it's such a vital step towards Beijing. Sexual and reproductive health and rights is the bedrock of gender equality. And so we need to get it right in November so that we move it forward to Beijing.
Beijing, Nairobi, Canada. So I turn to Raven. Raven, gender-based violence, violence against women, discrimination, there are things that are also happening here in Canada. You are the co-founder of an initiative, a campaign, Moose Hide, that was decided and started in 2011. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And you are the figure, the ambassador of this campaign. So what can you tell us about it, and why have you decided to start this campaign? Could you please share these feelings with us, this reason for the initiative, and also how you think that you can help to tackle, to highlight these problems and find solutions, use your power as a young person?
Great, thank you. Thank you for having me. What an honor it is to be on this panel. I love all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, we do.
I love each and every one of you. And if I could, I really feel like I need to introduce myself in my Indigenous language, carrier. Hadit, Raven Lacert Sadni, Loretta Madam Slew, Paula Cert Spa, Sai Gana Lachshabu, Injan Yinkak Dene Keo, Tibesna Chalia, Injan, Musqueam Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, Keo. So I said, hello, my name, thank you. I said, my name is Raven Lacert. I am carrier, a member of the Lake Babine Nation up in central British Columbia. I'm a member of the Bear Clan, and I acknowledge this beautiful territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The Moose Hide campaign, my dad and I started it in 2011 in the hopes of ending violence towards women and children and getting men involved in this space and creating a generational shift of including the men and boys and taking a stand against the violence that's happening towards women and children, and specifically Indigenous women and children in our country. So we have this Moose Hide pin that we're asking people to wear, and where does their commitment, their daily reminder to always speak out against the violence that's happening and to always speak up if they're witnessing the violence. So we've handed out over 2 million squares now across the country. And when you ask about how we could move the dial for gender equality, I really think back to my Indigenous roots, and I really truly believe that we need more ceremony, more culture, and more ancestral connection. We need to start or continue to decolonize the spaces that we're working in, and I think a lot of the patriarchy comes from this colonization and these colonial systems. So I really truly think that we need to start the decolonization process, and in that space put culture and ceremony and ancestral connection. And I'm really reminded about that all the time in the work that we're doing. And I think about my mom, who has passed away now in 2013 from cancer, and my grandma and her mom and her mom and her mom and her mom, all the way to our first mother. And I always think about what they've gone through to get to this point so that I can be here with you today. And I think about all of the women that have gone before all of you so that you could be here today with us as well. And all of those sacrifices that they make, and I just think it's really important that they had us in mind during their lives, and now we're here. And then we think about the next 7 generations that will come after us. So for me, my daughter is here with us today. Her name is Cedar. She's sleeping right now, but with her dad, Dominic. And I think about the work that I'm doing for her to make sure that she is treated with nothing but love and respect at all times. And for her children and her children's children all the way down the line of our descendants. So we think about it, 7 generations before us and 7 generations after us. It helps us to understand where we're coming from, where we're at today, and where we want to be 7 generations from now. So we are a cultural family. We learned this practice, this ceremony that I would like to share with you today, if that's okay. And it's thinking back about back on our line of women, of our mothers, all the way to our first mother. And so what we do is we close our eyes and we think about our mother's face. And we think about her mother's face and her mother's face all the way to our first mother. And we imagine that they're smiling at us and how proud of us they must be. So I would like to invite you to participate in this with me. I will sing a song. Cedar brought her drum, so I'm borrowing it today. And I'd like to sing the Women's Warrior song. It'll be just 2 verses of it so that you can close your eyes and think about your mothers, all the way down. And then I'll sing another 2 verses for the children that will come after us for the next 7 generations. And for the children, we want to pray for them and acknowledge them. We're doing this work. It's hard work, but we're doing it for them. So we're praying for love and health and happiness. So I'm going to sing the 2 verses for our mothers. So I invite you all to close your eyes if you want to participate. Hey, 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 yeah, he, oh, oh, yeah, he, oh, oh, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, yeah, he, oh, oh, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, hey, 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 yeah, he, oh, oh, yeah, he, oh, oh, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, yeah, he, oh, oh, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh. And now for the children. Hey, 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 yeah, he, oh, oh, yeah, he, oh, oh, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, yeah, he, oh, oh, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, hey, 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 yeah, he, oh, oh, yeah, he, oh, oh, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh, yeah, he, oh, oh, hey, hey, yeah, he, oh.
Ečkasiam.
Masicho, thank you.
Emilian de Leon, you work for Prospera, a very broad network of entities that are bringing funding from women to other women. Could you please tell us more about that entity and how it is helping not only the women today, but the coming generations as Raven nicely sung for.
Yeah, thank you very much, Catherine. So Prospera is the international network of women's funds. It's a community of philanthropic entities, feminist women's funds that are public foundations raising money to give grants and support the women's rights movements and feminist movements all over the world. So they give grants in 170 countries just to give flexible and core support, multi-year support. They also are risk takers. They are the ones who are looking an opportunity with a grassroots organization and really jumping in. They are the ones who are supporting the women's rights defenders. Within the community of women's funds, we have the Sisterhood of the Urgent Action Funds that are really giving grants, immediately response grants to those human rights defenders that are in risk, rather in their movements, in their lands, or whatever it is the issue. So women's funds are also allies of other private foundations, governments that are really willing and committed to be feminist. And I would say that we have to celebrate today, as we celebrate on the 2nd of June, the announcement of the Equality Fund from the Canadian government with Match International Fund and African Women's Development Fund, two members of Prospera, at 300 million Canadian dollars, that it's matched already with 100 million. And it will become. So these kind of things are the kind of things that, so women's funds could be seen also as catalyzers, no? As the ones who are really coming and supporting this movement that you very well described, that has been for many years really pushing towards a feminist policy at the governmental level with legislations that are against violence, for example, in many parts of the world. I was in a panel the other day in a session looking at a world map that showed us 75 as where were the feminist movements in the world, and at the same time where the policies about gender perspective or gender rights were. And then you can see 85, 95, 2005, 2015. And when you see the advancement of the policies in the world, it's due to the feminist movement, no? So now, just to say that we know also that without women's funds, there will be many grassroots organizations, many groups, many young people that it's just emerging and willing to do something that wouldn't have been funded. So the activists need to be funded, and women's funds are the ones who are doing it, not only them, of course, and we need to do more. So one of the things that I want to say is also that we have this pushback on gender rights from the very conservative movements. And we need to understand that these conservative movements might be the ones who are against our rights, but I would say not only our rights, they will be against human rights, against democracy, against the environment. So they are coming first against our rights, but they will come against, first thing. The second thing is that they are really smart on how to do this. Yeah. So they have a lot of money. They funded very well the organizations over decades to do that work, while the feminist movement is underfunded, mostly. So really we are also looking, on the other hand, a very vibrant movement that no matter how resist, persist, insist. It's resilient, it's moving, no matter how, where you be, you will find groups and movements moving forward. And we need to think more in different way how to fund this movement. If we continue funding the movement by project direction, by a transactional relationship, it's not going anywhere. We need to move from this transactional relationship to a transformative, that it's based in trust. Yes, it's based in partnership. So each one of us are doing their work, as you mentioned, and you two mentioned, no? About the jobs, for example. We need to think not only about of course, the digital gap, that it's going to be huge in the next years, but also about the other kinds of work that many women will be doing, and how it's not only women, but also men that are doing, like taking care of families, yes? Like taking care of the elderly people, that more and more our societies are getting older. So how are we going to dignify those kind of jobs and stopping this gap that it's really getting more and more and more. I think that's one of the things that the private sector, jointly with the UN system, and of course with the civil society organizations and the philanthropy, as women's funds, private foundations, etc., should be doing. So,
Alors justement, beaucoup de parallèles, beaucoup d'initiatives, je vais vous laisser prendre, voilà, beaucoup de parallèles. Non, pour ceux qui ne comprennent pas le français.
Could you just repeat the question again?
Beaucoup de parallèles, beaucoup d'initiatives qui sont prises dans le monde entier au même moment. Il faudrait peut-être essayer de rassembler les choses de la même manière que le Canada l'a fait et est suivi actuellement par la France. Le secteur privé, effectivement, est très important, peut nous aider. Comme Émilienne vient de nous le dire, il est important aussi de trouver des fonds pour donner une impulsion à toutes ces petites initiatives sur le terrain des mouvements féministes. Alors je me tourne justement vers vous. Le World Economic Forum a décidé de mettre sur pied une initiative. D'ici, vous allez nous expliquer ce qu'elle contient. D'ici 2030, vous souhaiteriez qu'elle soit signée par 50 grosses sociétés. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner plus de détails là-dessus? Comment ça va se passer de manière pratique? Et est-ce que vous avez l'intention, lors de la tenue de ces énormes réunions chaque année à Davos, où vous avez à la fois les gens du secteur privé, de la société civile, les chefs d'État, les grands décideurs, de peut-être réussir à les convaincre de faire un tout petit peu plus que de seulement signer une initiative, mais de mettre des choses en place?
2020, pas 2030. Donc,
2020,
l'année prochaine.
C'est court.
Yes. So there are two types of things that we're trying to do by January 2020, which is actually the 50th anniversary of the World Economic Forum in Davos. And there are two angles. So one angle is what I was referring to earlier, that we need companies to start thinking about how they're going to embed equality into their fastest growing roles. So yes, their leadership roles, yes, at the entry level, all of the other things that need to be done, but specifically their 5 fastest growing roles globally. So not in one country, but globally, and have 50 companies sign up to doing this within the next 7 months to make that pledge, and to deliver it within 2 years, so between 2020 and 2022. So in particular focused on the STEM and digital professions. But the idea is, let's do this as an experiment. So one, we can expand this to other occupations, to healthcare occupations, to broadly the care economy occupations, a number of others where we need more equality, both men going into female-dominated professions and the other way around. And second, to be able to expand that to a lot more companies. That's one. The second aspect is, none of this, I mean, to your point on, if we want to reach gender equality not in 202 years, but within the next couple of years, and most certainly by 2030, then this is not going to work if it's project by project or if it's a bunch of siloed initiatives from different organizations. To make that work, you need to take a systemic approach. We need to be able to see the entire system and have systemic level interventions. And second, we need to work as a platform. And that is the pledge from the World Economic Forum. We're setting up a model of accelerators at a national level. So the public sector, the private sector, and the civil society sector coming together and making a 2-year commitment to accelerate gender equality very rapidly, using the 50 to 100 of the biggest employers in that country. We've set up the model, we've experimented with 8 economies, and now in the next 7 months, we're going to roll this out to 15 economies, so that by 2020, we have enough pilots to be able to say, here's what works, and then make that model available to many other economies, and really putting the full power of the private sector through the World Economic Forum towards this activity. And the third thing, which I wasn't going to say, is simply we invite a lot of other organizations to join the forum platform, right? Because we're trying to take this platform and systemic-based approach, this is also not going to work if it's just the initiatives from the forum. So we have an open invitation out to others who'd like to join us.
So Lopa, UN Women?
So, you know, what I wanted to say was that we are sitting here 1 year away from the 25th anniversary of Beijing, and this year the 25th anniversary of ICPD, 50th anniversary of Davos, and next year also the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. And all of those who were there, more than 40,000 people who were there in Beijing developing the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, did not believe that we would be sitting here today, 25 years later, talking about gender equality still being slow, sluggish, and with not a single country in the world having achieved gender equality, in spite of political will to do so in some parts of the world. So clearly, what's next on the trajectory towards gender equality is impatience, is urgency, is absolute and unassailable and unshakable commitment to action. So, and we have the opportunities to do that. There will be, of course, the Nairobi conference. We will have all the regional consultations for Beijing starting this year, the 5 regional consultations, the Commission on the Status of Women next year, and the Global Forum in next year, 2020, in July, starting off in Mexico and culminating in Paris. The Global Forum for Gender Equality that will bring together everybody that is sitting on this panel, actually, governments, young people, industry, the United Nations, civil society, and all of you over here to ensure that we have an accelerated agenda for action, that we say that in our watch, under our watch, this time, generation equality now. And that's what this conjoined activism mobilization must be for. So that when we get to 2030, we are well on the path to equality and not sitting in 2030 saying no country in the world has achieved gender equality.
Yeah. So Canada is committed. Canada is going to continue to push what, like you say, push back the pushbacks.
Well, Katya Iverson says that. I just think it's a great idea. And yes, Canada will be there. And there's a reason why Canada wants the seat at the UN Security Council, because we have the humility to know that we have a lot of work left to do here at home, but globally we have a convening power that we try to use wisely. We want that seat around the UN Security Council because we as Canadians have a proud tradition of taking care of our neighbors, people who may look different, worship different, speak different languages than we do. But we are all part of the same fabric of humanity. And Canada will be there. We talked backstage with the World Economic Forum. So team, Caroline on standby, the main quarterback for the Equality Fund at Global Affairs is sitting at the front row here. So the two of you should connect because this thing they're doing is the thing we're doing. So let's do it together because, yes, no more silos. And yes, be impatient. And remember that this movement, there are women rising, there are feminists rising all over the world, and men are part of the work with us. And that hasn't been really the case in the past. But if Canada is the #1 investor now in women's organizations globally and at home, if we're the #1 investor in protecting and securing sexual rights and health and reproductive rights, it's because we have a prime minister who happens to be a dude who's deeply invested in advancing gender equality. So what happens when we have more men in this work is this movement that our ancestors have handed to us gets stronger and gets a bit more impatient, and that is the only way that we're going to move forward. And we just woke up Cedar, Raven's baby. So that's a good thing, right? That's a good omen.
So what about the United Nations Population Fund? You're going to push again and again. You're going to develop and fight against these attacks that are now that we see all over the world, unfortunately. Absolutely. We have 5 months to gather everyone in Nairobi.
Yeah, well, we've been doing this for 50 years.
Yeah, so I hope that...
Because we were based on this premise that it is a right of every person to decide for him or herself the number and spacing of children. That was the starting point for it. We'll never give up that fight. By the way, what I want to also emphasize, the Nairobi is not a conference, it's a summit. And a summit means it is for high-level political person. And the reason why we did this is precisely because we want more Prime Minister Trudeau to come and to commit to this agenda, because very often it's like, oh, it's a women's agenda, and it's all talking about traditional harmful practices and violence, and, you know, let other ministers come. No. We want the highest political buy-in for this agenda, because it deserves it. And it can only move when it is that at the highest political level that people commit themselves to it, and that for everyone to see that they've committed themselves to it. So we'll fight this fight, 4,000 strong as UNFPA, every single day in 150 countries, to ensure ultimately the dream of universal access to sexual and reproductive health for all, and rights guaranteed for all. We're in there for the long haul, but it's the right fight to do. And I think we'll never give up until that dream has become a real dream for everyone. And until that, then you can close UNFPA. But that's unfortunately not some time back. But guaranteed, this is the agency in the UN with probably the most difficult mandate. It is the mandate that the first gets criticized. There's something to be pushed out is the sexual and reproductive health. Why is that? Why is it? And I come back to this issue. There's a famous quote from a famous gynecologist, Mahmoud Fatala, who once said, "Women do not die in childbirth because of diseases we can't treat. They die because we haven't made their health a priority." And he said that 15 years ago, and it's still relevant today. It's still a reality today.
It's sad.
It's beyond sad.
It's outrageous.
It's a moral outrage that that's happening. As our sister said, we come from the same mother. We didn't drop out of the sky. We came from mothers. We came from mothers that brought us there. And they have the right to go through their pregnancy as a minimum in a safe manner that we bring to. And so this is the fight we do. We never give up. It's important that in November we recommit globally to that agenda. And as I said, we want more people that, as Prime Minister Trudeau, that not just walk the talk, they do the talk, but they walk the talk. And we need less talk and more walk for this agenda.
Thank you, Arthur. I mean, you just spoke about Prime Minister Trudeau. So action, we need more action. What is Canada going to do? Canada is leader in that field. So
we are now. And we haven't always been. There was a decade when the word gender was removed from Canada's foreign policy, and that decade came right before we formed government. So in Canada, our leadership is not guaranteed, and it is up to people to choose this fall whether we're going to continue on a path that equality drives economic growth, that it's the right thing to do, that it lifts people out of poverty, that it creates opportunities, that it allows Canada to meet the call for leadership on the international stage. And, you know, before I get too far ahead of myself, I see the clock winding down on what's been the single largest gathering of feminists on the planet in the 21st century. And you know, there's an art to hosting 8,000 plus people, and the team at Women Deliver and my team at Global Affairs and Women and Gender Equality have done an exceptional job. And I am so proud to be your minister. And all of you here, you have brought stories of pain and hardship and resilience from every corner of the world. And you have shown us that we may have different challenges, but they are on the same spectrum. And that we are united. It is one movement. It is one strong voice. It is a proud history of struggle, and that our struggle is the same struggle. But if you're in this room in beautiful BC, in one of the most privileged cities in Canada in many ways, you're here as a privileged individual, and there are millions of people around the world who can't ever be in rooms like this. So my call to action to myself and the Peterborough folks who are here, which is my hometown in Ontario, is what do we do when we leave here as individuals who have the power of one? What do we do when we go out there? Who do we talk to? Who do we share the stories we learned here with? How many media outlets are we going to speak with? How many more convening spaces are we as leaders in our own countries, in our own communities going to invest in? And know that Canada will be there. Canada will be there, and we will be there with humility and with courage and with results from our own economic growth and progress. But we will be listening to the people. You create the space for politicians like us to move ahead. You create the demand and the impatience and the urgency that leads to UN Women being created, that leads to UN resolutions being adopted. So what will we as individuals who were here in this watershed moment in Vancouver in 2019 take with us to our communities to maintain the momentum? So I put that right back on you, but I know that the leaders who are here are feisty, well-informed feminists with really great networks, and I have no doubt that we will start a ripple of women rising all over the world that we will look back on in 2030 and say, that was a moment too. That was a moment that accelerated progress and change.
So, Raven, what will you do with the power you have?
Yeah, I dream of a future where Indigenous and women and children are treated with love and respect, and that they're safe and thriving. I dream of a future where our people are proud and happy and healthy. And I dream of a place of our Mother Earth, happy and healthy and thriving. And what I will do with my power is to continue the work to make sure that those things become a reality, and to continue my work with the Moosehide campaign and bringing men and boys into this space and creating space for them to come in a good way, and so that we can do this work together. So continue to have these conversations and continue to do this work.
Emilienne de Leon, what will you do when you will be back?
This conference has been very inspiring, first of all, so thank you very much for Women Deliver to organize it. And I want to share some of the thoughts that I've heard from a session, that it was about how feminist movements and women's funds and everyone who's really struggling to get this gender equality a reality and to push back the pushback, have told us about we need to also fund very well this movement, but at the same time build solidarity, have friendship, really look at each one of us, how we support each other, yes, and how we build alliances and collaborative efforts. We cannot continue working in isolation, and I think women's funds are the perfect partner and ally for many reasons, for the feminist movements because they follow their agenda, they are the ones who are there, but also because the way they are opening the feminist perspective for other funders is really critical, because you can have the container about feminist policies, but what is the content of the feminist policy? And this content, I listen from Noeline, a leader from Fiji, I really like it, because we can hear in the mainstream a lot about feminists and gender equality and women's rights, and then when you go to the content, could be very empty and only have a container. So we need to feel that. And it's only the feminist movement, the women's rights organizations, the girls, the trans people, everyone, the diversity of entities, of identities, that can really move this towards happening as a reality in 2030.
Arthur, what are you going to do with your power and the power you've felt here?
Well, obviously, working for the UN, it's upon us, and certainly in a UN agency that has a mandate to defend sexual and reproductive health and rights for women and girls in particular. We're going to use our convening power to make sure that there is that space where we can debate this difficult topic, sensitive topic for some, to find common ground to move us forward. And that's, I think, very important, to build partnerships around this agenda that are strong, that are beyond the SRHR community, where others are coming in, to this big tent to discuss this. It was interesting because in the beginning of the year, or even late last year, we were debating internally, so what do we do with 2019? There is this pushback. It's difficult to negotiate it in the UN context at the moment, we know that. So we can do two things. You can sit on your hands and thinking it blows over, or we try to do something in a different way to make it happen. And we all said to each other, we don't want to look into the mirror at the end of 2019 and say, did I do everything I could to move the agenda forward, and then to say no, that will be a disaster. So we're going to try as hard as we can. We are human beings, we will make mistakes, but we're going to try as hard as we can to move this agenda forward, Nairobi and beyond, to make sexual and reproductive health and rights a reality for all, and to leave no one behind, truly.
Sadia, you, when you will be back in Geneva, what are you going to do?
I have 3 professional commitments and 1 personal one. So on the professional side of things, I think really leveraging the full power of the World Economic Forum, it's a commitment we've already made. 1, the 50 companies committing to hardwiring gender equality into the future of jobs. 2, 15 economies, both large and small, developing and developed economies that can pilot and showcase the way forward. And 3, serve as a lot more of a platform and a broker working in partnership with others, people like Katja Iverson of Women Deliver and others around the world, Minister Monsef's offer to work together, really leverage that and be more of a broker for partnerships. On a more personal side, from the part of the world that I come from, one of the largest migrations from home to work has taken place as 50 million more women have joined the workforce, broadly speaking, across the Muslim world. Help tell much more of their stories and push back against the pushback that they get.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, Lopa, you'll be back soon in New York in the big house. So what are you going to do with your power?
You know, it has been wonderful being here, but the wonder doesn't end today. The wonder is going to continue through the rest of this year and into next year and into the Global Forum for Gender Equality in Paris and in Mexico and beyond. And our commitment as UN Women is that we will create the stage at the Global Forum in July next year, so that all of us here on the stage, all of you in the room, and everybody outside in the world can jump together to bring down the pillars of patriarchy and create an equal world for all of us.
Minister Monsef, what are you going to do with the power you have?
Well, I talked about it on the first time I had a mic here. I'm just going to fight really hard to keep my power in the next election. And tell the stories. And tell the stories that I've heard here about why our Feminist International Assistance Policy matters to the 9-year-old girl who is being raped by a family member, and why it's important for us to support women's organizations, and why the Equality Fund is a smart, unifying platform, and keep supporting my Prime Minister and the team around him, because none of us walk this walk alone. If any of us have achieved any progress, it's because of the teams of teams we have around us. And I'm going to spend more time with the little girls in my life, because I closed my eyes when you asked me to, Raven, and I saw my mom's face, and I saw my grandmother's face, and then I saw Layla and Ilya's face. Layla's going to be 10, Ilya's 3, and I want to know by 2030 that I did everything I could to make sure the world is better for them, that they are equal in every way. And Cedar's looking at me, and I look forward to her coming up to me after she's become president of the world and saying, hey, you're that lady who helped my amazing mom do stuff, so thank you. I'll be nice to you.
Thank you so much, ladies, gentlemen. Don't forget, you have the power to change things. Thank you to Women Deliver, and thank you to Canada.
There she is. Thank you so much.
This concludes our plenary session. Ainsi s'achève cette séance plénière.